Newhouse. And like most of the people here, I actually am a former student of Mike's and in symbolic dynamics. My first meeting with him, actually, I think, is when he came down and gave a lecture in Chapel Hill before he actually came to Maryland. He came down and actually he was looking for jobs at the time. And I remember my interest in dynamics wasn't really much in symbolic dynamics per se at the time. I was just learning, so okay, I was aware of his existence more or less. And then in the mid-'80s, I spent a year in Maryland. And I remember, because the main people I knew here, I mean, I knew he had the job here, but I didn't really know him very well. And the main people I knew here were people like Misha Bren, and Michael Jacobson, and also Dan Rudolph. And so whenever I had a question about ergodic theory, about those kinds of technical issues, I would go to Dan's office, and I noticed that after a while, my questions, some of them became oriented towards symbolic dynamics, and Dan would push me off. Maybe he was tired of seeing me. He would push me off and say, why don't you go talk to Mike about this? And so one of the particular things I remember very much is I was interested in this theorem of Krieger about approximation of subshifts, what periodic data really characterize those. So I happened to see Mike, I was in the coffee room, and I asked him about it, and he proceeded to give me an absolutely clear description of something that involved an oracle and something that involved some special kind of coding. And so after that, every time I bypassed Dan. And every time I had a question, and I would go bother him, and it could be any time. And as people have attested, he really he took the time. It was never one of these, well, not now, not now, no matter how trivial the question was. In fact, even at the last meeting, I had asked him a question about certain kinds of things, and he took the next day. I got a nice description written out neatly, and then he was willing not only to give it to me, but to take the time to explain it to me as well. So he's always, I regard him as basic. I regard myself in certain aspects of symbolic dynamics as a student of his. Now, I come to these meetings fairly regularly, not all the time, not every meeting. And this particular one, I noticed on the website that it was in honor of Mike Boyle's 60th birthday. And I said, oh, come on. That can't be right. And so I figured, well, the organizers wouldn't lie, so it must be right or something. Then I came here and I looked at him a little. I said, no, it still can't be right. So other people have attested to his youthful appearance, and so I don't have to say more about that. Let me mention one other thing regarding this notion of symbolic extension entropy. At one point, actually, I was in his office, and he was telling me about these technical things about symbolic things. This was fairly not so long ago, a few years, maybe a decade ago or so, and maybe even less, actually, about 6 or 7 years ago. And I was sort of listening, okay, because I was doing other things. And suddenly he said, well, for example, there's this question about when you have symbolic extensions, and so, for example, if it's asymptotically H expansive, then you have, and then suddenly I paid attention, because that's something I had thought about for a lot, and it really connected me with that. And so, okay, I went back, and then he called me one time, and he said, I want to have a visitor next year. His name is, it wasn't called Tomas Dognarovich to us, it was Thomas Donarowitz. It was the English description. And he can come here for half a year, but we need him, he wants to stay in the U.S. for a little longer. Can he stay a little, is there anything he could do up at Michigan State? And I'm not used to getting visitors at Michigan State in terms of, it was a big rigmarole, but I went into the chairman and I said, well, what can we do? And he agreed. So suddenly, out of the blue comes Tomas, and he gives these beautiful lectures about convergence of measures and entropy, and I got hooked on the subject very much. But at that time, it was not called SEX entropy. It was called S.E.X entropy. And it was not really, it was symbolic extension. There was never the word of sex, right? So Thomas and I made jokes about this after a while. I said, well, you know, it's the sex entropy. And we would be in the coffee room talking about the sex entropy, and everybody would sort of look at us like that. It became a very hot topic like that. And so we even had a discussion, should the name be changed? And Thomas said, oh, come on, you Americans, what are you talking about? Keep it the same, remember this. And so we more or less kept it the same. And then I went to a meeting in California, in Berkeley. And I shouldn't say who it was. He's not here to defend himself, but I more or less, it was John Smiley. He said, well, what are you doing these days? And I'm talking about symbolic extensions and things like that. And we have this notion of sex entropy. And he looked, he said, change the name. Change it. I said, why? He said, because no one will be able to access this on the internet. There are all these blocked sites and you'll never see it, so no one will ever hear about it. Well, I think they were maybe a little bit wrong anyhow. So Mike, many more. I'm looking forward actually to the next 60th.